Right, we're going to show you this jig plate that I've been doing. Now this won't really appeal to some of you as part of making the collector, but it depends if you're making a one-off manifold and header and stuff for yourself, or whether you're actually going to make them for someone else. So as you can see in the background here, I've got all the different headers taken off of my manifold. This one's labelled number 2, and then what I try to do, and it pays dividends in the end, is when you're building something like this, especially if you're using schedule 10, schedule 40, is I try and avoid, I've only done this once, this is the first one, but I do it with any part I do, any kind of pipe, if you're using bends that you can buy off the shelf, is try and avoid bends where you're grinding sections off to make stuff fit. I know it needs to be done now and again, but ideally avoid it if you can. And what I mean by that is, if this is your 45 degree stainless schedule 10 bend that you get off the shelf, and that's how it comes, or a 90 degree bend, then when you're cutting them down, work out how you can cut them exactly the same. If it takes you all day to make bends that replicate perfectly, spend that day and do it, because when you're repeating the process and you're making another manifold for someone else, the worst thing you can do, or have to do, is have all these sections here, and every single one of them you just ground a little bit off with the flap disc, and you ground a little bit off that angle with a flap disc, because you're going to really struggle to replicate that every time. Whereas on everything here, other than one of the tubes, and I even know that angle as well, is that these shorter bends started off life as a 45, and now in my saw I've got marked down the correct angle, and so I'm against the backstop on the saw, I know the correct distance that this sits across from that backstop. So once I've got my length of tube, I'll weld on a full 90 degree, then I know the angle to put my saw at, and I know the cut, and I will get this size every single time, like so. Then I can cut that for all the parts. So I try and make all the runners out of these cuts from 45, or these cuts from 90 degrees. I think that one is a 45, sorry. But I do the same thing with the 90 degrees. I've got it all worked out so I can replicate the bends very simply. That way you're never going to struggle. I could cut, if I wanted to in one hit, I could cut a box of 100 of them, spend all day, spend 2 days doing it, and then have them to one side and then only ever use them. Right, here's a couple of them fixture plates. Now this is the one I was showing in the video as the doorbell went, but at some point between getting sorted and moving, because this part of the video cuts to the new workshop, randomly I lost the video after the doorbell went. So we're missing between talking about this jig and going over and cutting and making the parts for this header number 3. So once that's gone, that video, I can't get it back. I don't know how I deleted it, but anyway, so I was showing you the pipe on this one. Now I can't show you the piece here because it's actually mocked up and is on the manifold. I'll show you, it's just on the shelf there. But just consisted of a rest of the pipe on that bit, so you know the angle, backstops and backstop, and one front stop on here, so we know what we're doing with the bend coming up to the back. Now it's going to skip, it'll make a bit more sense when you see the rest of the video, but rather than showing one clip, jumping straight into another and thinking, hang on a minute, there's a bit missing there, I'll just explain to you quickly that it's not there. So the video will now skip to doing this one, and we'll show you cutting these pieces, drawing them up on solid edge, cutting them, and then welding this jig plate, and then we can carry on. Sorry, right, I'm just going to show you quickly here. We're drawing up the parts and we're using solid edge 2D. So I've got this scrap of paper and I've just drawn up a quick sketch of the pieces I need for the jig. So here, sorry about the drawing, but we've got just a couple of limit stops for the straight edges of pipe. We've got that one there is going to be a small end stop for the angle. We've got this one here is the half tube piece that rests underneath, or should I say the tube rests on top of, and this piece is just like a wedge to triangulate it to give it some support. So I've already drawn these, so I'm just going to open them up. Actually, I'll redraw one again, and then for those of you that don't use this, you can see how straightforward it is. I'm not sure how this is going to come out on the camera, but this is about as close as I can get you. This solid edge 2D is a free software that you can just download. So for example, if we're going to do this one here, which is a half section of tube hollowed out for our schedule 10 to rest in. The schedule 10 is roughly 42mm, so we're going to go 43 mil wide, and we'll draw it like a circle, and we'll come off the sides to give it some support. And we want 40mm from the bottom of that tube section to the base, and then obviously to them top ears is going to be half of 43mm, which is going to be 21.5. So I'll show you how we draw that quick. So we go to our circles. We want 43mm circle, so I'll whack that there. I'll just bring that out for you a little bit. Now I roughly want 10mm either side, just give you a little bit of clearance. So if we find the center of this to the edge is 21.5, so we want to come 10mm out. So if we do 31.5, there might be quicker ways to do this, but this is just how I always work it. I'm no CAD designer, that's for sure. So 31.5 again, and then we said we wanted 40mm from this center line downwards, plus half of that, so it's going to be 61.5. So if we come down here, this doesn't have to be exact, 61.5, and then you can toggle up to this corner, and then it will bring you down a dotted line just to know that you're in the same sort of area. So that's there, and we went 60mm wide according to this, so that's what we're at there. We're actually on 63, but that's fine. So if we then, now we've got this circle, obviously we don't need this top section, we can use a little tool up here which gets rid of pieces like that. And then we don't want sharp edges on the jig because this is 3mm steel, and if you're using thin wall stainless, or even if you're using the Schedule 10, these sharp corners here, if you can see them, can either scratch up the pipe if you've polished it before you put it in, or you cut yourselves on it. So if we use the radius tool, we'll go in there and we'll say we'll put a 5mm radius on these outside edges and follow it on to the inside, and then that just rounds them over nicely so that we don't have that sharp edge. And then we'd go in here, save as. Now I've already done these parts, so I don't need to do that, so this part can just be deleted. And then what you end up with is you end up with a DXF file that you then open up into SheetCam, because I need to put it into SheetCam to do the G code to then put it in Mac 3. So you'd go File, New Job. Do you want to save your changes? No. File, sorry, Import Drawing. I'm not sure if this is the same piece. I think it is, so let's say Header 3, Jig Part 1. Open it up, and there it is. Very simple. Then because we haven't got to do anything to it, and there's only the outside profile, we've got it on 3mm mild steel for the tool, which is set up for your cutting feeds and speeds. And then here we are, outside offset, the one layer, because you haven't got any other features on this, 3mm mild steel, and we click on that, and that has created our tool path. Now I'm not sure if you can see this easily, but we've got our start and stop down here, and then it travels clockwise around the part, because you always want the right hand side of the torch cutting onto the part. So that's that done. Now what we do is we'd save that, run post processor, we'd save that job, and then what it gives you is a tap file, and the tap file is what you use for your G code. So I've already got these listed here, and I'll move you over a little bit if I can without dropping the camera. Let's just try and move that there a little bit. If I can, steady you there, and I'll turn you onto this computer. And then we've loaded this part here, and what I'll do is I've already cut that one, so rather than cut that one again for no reason, I'm going to go for the second part, which is a bit more basic. But if we just go to there, this is just the end stop piece. So this piece here, I've done exactly the same process, solid edge, then SheetCam, then a tap file, and then this is this piece here. So we'll show you there. We'll get our machine zeroed up. I'll take you over to the plasma, and I've just got to make sure that we're clear and we've got the space and we're in the right position to start, which we are. Could bring that down ever so slightly. So we're in a start position there. We'll zero our X, Y and Z axis. That's ready to start. So what I'll do is going to be a very quick part because this has got high cutting speeds. So I'll just move this camera angle and get you set up here so you can see. I'll plonk you there. And we'll cut this part quickly. Blink and you miss it. Here we go. Get that out of the way. And there we have our part. All we've got to do is clean up a bit of dross just on the back. But nice cut there. And we've done a couple of the other parts. That's the rest piece that I was just showing you how to draw. And then this is one of the backstop limits. So I'll leave you there to watch while I quickly set up and we cut the rest of the parts. I think there's 2 more to go. This is the longer backstop. Cut 2 of these. Use a magnet to get the part out. And our last part, just one of the end supports. There we go. So here we have all our parts to run our second jig. So let's go back out in the shed and we'll get the jig set up and I'll show you how we tack it all up in place. So now we've got the plate and all our pieces cut and deburred for the next jig. Now there's no point cleaning all that scale off. We just weld through it. It doesn't weld overly nice, but for this it really doesn't matter. If you wanted to clean it off, by all means, but I don't think it's worth it. So this is the one we're jigging up now, header number 3. So lay that flat on your base plate, roughly get it sort of centralised where you think you want it, which for me is about there. And the first thing I have to do is take one of my backstops and just line it up here. And then I'm just going to use a heavy piece of steel square just to keep that at 90 degrees. because you don't want to weld it at an angle or leaning towards you. You want to weld it up nice and straight. I'm happy with that. Let's take my glasses off. Get my welding lid on. And we'll just tap that in place at either end. There's one back plate. I'm going to clean this because touch down there. Because this is sitting up against the tube, we can weld on both sides without this interfering. So I'm just going to take this filler and I'm just going to weld an inch in the middle, then I'll flip it round and I'll do an inch at each end where I've undertacked. The amps turn right down there. That'll do. Not pretty, but it'll do. If you clean it, you'll get a really nice weld on it, but that's entirely up to you. If you leave the scale on these plates, other than where you've deburred the edges, then if they're sitting around in your workshop, then they're not going to go so rusty if they're left there for a long time. So we'll just put that block on the back there, and we'll do an inch at either end. Still there at moved a little bit on us, not enough to make a difference. So then we'll get our tube, roughly get it where you want it. Hold mine there, that sits dead flat. And then what you can do, this piece here, I'll try and turn the jig so you can see it. That's the bit will match up with this tube. So just rest that on the end. You don't want to put it right at the end, just put it so it's sitting underneath there. That's good enough. And what we'll do is we'll tap that in place. Making sure that this tube is pushed back against the stock and everything's sitting flat. Now there's no support on this yet obviously, but straight away you can see how easy it's going to be to get our tube. Oh. hit the camera with a torch. So yeah, straight away you can see how easy it's going to be to get this tube and locate it on these datums, if you want to call them that. And then obviously this end's the one that's got the angle on it, and you don't know what that needs to be, so you want to get them all together at the same time. So this end plate will just butt up against there to give you the angle of this tube, which, like I said, when I've done it, I think it was about 5 degrees, maybe 6 degrees. So I'll just get that in place where it needs to be, and we'll just tack that down as well. Nicely there at 90. Realistically, you could leave it at that. This is going to need some support because you don't want it getting bent over. Alright, oh, just drop me a bit of steel there. But there you have your limits. Now you can't go far wrong. So for example, if we was to get this now we know that this needs to be rotated until this side here, you can see that. Let me see if I can get you in view a bit better there. So if you see here, if I rotate, I've got a huge gap here. So if I keep rotating that until I'm flat, which is there. Now I know that is in the correct place. And I'll get my 90 there, which I know sits at that angle. It's not a 90, sorry, but that is cut from a 90. That's a shortened piece. Then I know this here sits flat. And once again, lift you up there, you can see that that's not tacked in place, but that is a very accurate copy of the original pipe. So it's a very simple way to do a jig, doesn't take much, hasn't got to be out of really expensive material, and it hasn't even got to be complicated. It's just got to be simple, and it's got to be repeatable. Make it as easy for yourself as possible. Obviously there's no point going into all this effort if this is a one-off, because if you're never going to replicate it again, there's no point. But I don't know if I'll sell any more of these, or if I'll only sell the one that I've obviously already done. But for the time it takes me, and where I'm just starting out, I'm a little bit quiet at the moment anyway, so I'd prefer to do this jig just in case. So I'm going to do this, I'm going to tack these up, and then I'm going to do the same for these ones that are a little bit more complicated. They've got quite a few more angles in them, but again, if you use the same process and the same reasoning about having a stop at the end, stop at the back, and a reference for your angle and to where it sits, then it's going to be exactly the same. This looks like a complicated piece, but if you move this one out the way a little bit and you put this here, if you put that there, you'd think, oh, it's a lot of up and down angles. If we turn this the other way and we put it this way round, now this end all the way to here is flat. So I'd actually make this jig this way round probably, and I'd do myself a backstop here on this one, a backstop here, an end plate for this angle again, because as you can see, that is not a straight piece, it's on an angle and it's actually led inwards. And then all you've got to do is give yourself another piece here to hold this tube up, and then these bends you'll kind of work out where you are. I know it seems more complicated, but that's only one bend in the middle with two straights, and that one's already pre-cut. So this here will actually be a lot less complicated than it looks, but I'll do that for the other few. I'll get each copy pipe tacked in place, and then I'll show you the whole lot of them afterwards. So here we are, all 4 jig plates are done, so I thought I'd show you them all finished. This is one of the ones I was showing you earlier on. So here's my original pipe. So this is header number 3 off of the manifold I done. Nice tight fit. under there, an angle there to match. Now this is quite a straightforward one. Now this was cut purely for measurements of a straight, an angle, my bends that I know and can cut individually, and then tacked up in this jig, and then there you go. Matching bend, nice and tight there, sits in the same place. The only difference being is this might be a little bit shorter because this was too long, sticking right through the flange on the manifold. So that's ready to go for my mock-up and my master, and this is the one that's cleaned up, ready to weld for the customer. Let's move that one to one side. You can see the mess you get in while you're working. Looking forward to my new space very soon, and we'll show you this one that you also saw earlier on. No end stop needed because this is a straight up angle, so I keep that and check that that's straight by using a small bar here and then a right angle off of here, so that should be 90 degrees. And then again we've got this on the rest. Simple jig, that one out, mocked up and measured pieces, back into the jig, sits back down, fits lovely. Same there. Now you may have very slight variations on these because the end of the pipes, if the bevel's different, any of my straights that I've cut have been put in the lathe and faced off, so the ends are true, but that's not necessarily going to be the case for the bends that come from the manufacturer. Now here's one of the more difficult pieces that you'd have said. So this is the original. We've done the same. We've got an angle stop, guides and back stops either side here, one here, and then we've got these two angle pieces, the same as before, underneath here, just putting the rest so we know where this bit of pipe sits. And again, this was made in 1, 2, 3 pieces, with these two being the final ones to just rotate and clock to get our true reference of what we want. So you'd say a hard pipe to copy, but when you've got the simple jig and you're using bends that you know exactly what the angles are and you can replicate them, bang straight in there, follows the plate up on all the stops, and then sits nicely on these two as before. So very straightforward. When you make these jigs, make them reasonably tough, because the chances are they are going to lay around for some time. And when I've made jigs in the past, you have problems that if you ever tend to get a lot of them and they get chucked on top of each other, you don't want them to be bent up and adjusted and then you go and make the pipe to suit. Now here's another one made out of 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, and then these two are the last pieces to clock and reference the same as that, because you can see that is a little bit of a cack-handed shape. But the same with the jig, we've got an end stop for this angle to suit, back stop, stop on both sides here, and then again on this end 2 plates to pick up the angle here. So once again, sounds really simple, really accurate. There you are, straight into the jig, and that will be like that every single time, purely because I've taken the time and I know the angles of every bend. I can replicate them every time, give or take the tiniest amount of tolerance, and then I can make the runners up to suit. And what I'll do, the only thing that's going to give me a slight difference every time I make it, because there's no real way to jig it up, is when you do the actual collectors. So this is the main one done with the wastegate taken off and ready to weld up. When you're doing the collectors, and my other one is actually on the jig here, if I lay this jig down, when you're doing the collectors, they're going to be ever so slightly different. Might be in the length. I cut them the same. I do the same angled cuts, but the saw, it has slight deviation on the actual bandsaw blade when making these downward cuts. So you do get a very slight difference on the angle, which by the time you're bringing your runner up, say for example it was to be this end, when you're bringing your runner up to this collector here, it could be slightly out or it could be slightly off. But when you've got 99% of the pipe the right shape, then it's only ever so slight tweaking. You may want to break off a tack and rotate slightly, but if you can make this part, even without going near the car or without going near even the jig, I don't even need the jig to make these, like that main jig, I can make these straight on the bench here with my measurements and these plates. So if you can get it that close before you even have to start messing around with it, then you're onto a winner. So there they are. I'll show you them in a little while when they're all tacked up. Here's the main jig fixture I wanted to show you quickly. Now obviously you can see we've got our head flange on this piece here, and then this piece with the 4 holes is where our collector sits, and that's mocked up from when I done the manifold in the car first off. So these are our final positions, or if you want to call them the datums, for the head flange and for the collector. But more so what I wanted to show you is with these head flanges, if you're trying to make a jig that's accurate and again repeatable, the same as I showed you with the collectors, not the collectors, sorry, the actual header tubes, keeping them as exact as you can. With these flanges, they always have movement on the bolts that go to the head, which is fine when it's on the car. How you line that up when it's on the car is down to you, but when you're making these as a repeatable part on a jig, this movement here, if you tack one of these tubes in place and it's over there, this next one may not fit. So to eradicate this is just showing you with the bolts. So these are like 13 point something mil holes, but the studs on the head are only 10 mil. So what you can do to give yourself that little bit of leeway and make it repeatable every time, these are water jet cut flanges. What I done, machined up some stainless steel collars. These slip over the bolts and these take up that slack, as you can see there. So let's just put them collars in. We've only done it on 5 of the holes because a couple of them on here, for whatever reason, 2 of the studs are a different size. And 1 more this end. Now if I just snug these down by hand, not even gonna tighten them up, not even really finger tight, just down so they're touching the head flange. That's how tight we're going with them. That one there and this last one. There you go. So these are all just literally finger tight. I won't do these end ones up because they're the ones that are different. There's an elongated hole on this one, it's a smaller size here, but from that movement we had before, now we've got nothing, and we can even back these off ever so slightly, and that's what we've got. I don't even know if you can pick up that movement. So in comparison, now that's going to stay where we want it almost perfectly each and every time we put these together. And again, anything like this, what you want is repeatability, because it makes your job easier in the long run. So I'm ready to weld this manifold up today, which is going to be interesting. The first one I've done, so I'm not sure what trials and tribulations we'll come across, but I wanted to show you. I popped out this morning and got some fittings to purge each runner. So I'll just nip these down quick and then I'll show you the runners. So we've got these M6 nylocks. Not worried about them being nylock because they're not going to get that hot on this piece that they're going to melt. If they do, it's not the end of the world. But these are, on the other side, these are M6x1, and on the other side is push fit pneumatic airline fittings, the same as these. So there's one of these under each one here. So 1, 2, 3 and 4 coming out to individual pipes, number 1, number 2, number 3 and number 4 is labelled there, so I know what one I'm putting the gas in. This is my purge line, and I'll connect that on, push that onto whichever one I'm doing at the time, coming from the regulator set up there, and then so that the gas doesn't get to the collector and then start flowing back, I'll seal these up individually on the inside. I'll just bung this up in here so that the gas can get to the point. I'll just use a tin foil or wire wool, something that won't let it pressurise when you're doing your final welds, but something that will stop the gas just completely flooding into the next header. I'll show you down the side there so you can see the fittings a bit better. I'm not sure how clear that's going to be for you, but you can make them out in there with the lines. So yeah, that's the setup for purging each runner as we weld it. Now it's time to get it bolted up and start welding. I'll bring you back in a minute. So here we have the second manifold, all the original pieces on the jigs over there, and this is the second manifold. Now using them jig plates, we've managed to get this tacked up, making each one of these headers off of this jig. We didn't have to make anything on this jig. We got them all on there, and they were all, say, about 95% perfect. Now this is always going to be my mock-up one to keep, so don't worry about the welding or the fact I've not cleaned up the tubes. This is just to show you the kind of fit and finish I've got after spending the extra time making a decent jig and a decent fixture. So there we go. Now I did have to modify one of these pipes for a better fit, and to be fair, it needed to be a better fit. The original was very tight, and that was this one here. This one here was clocked ever so slightly anti-clockwise from where it is now, so you can see on there the original tack weld and how far I've clocked it and rotated it clockwise. So I'll amend that on the jig, because that is a much better fit, because before we were sunk into the flange here with the fitting, but on this side here we were just showing a slight gap where the pipe, the bend wasn't situated inside the flange. So that is a very easy fix, and considering that's the only amendment I had to make on these, I'm well happy with that. So there we go. I'll get the original one back on here now, and we'll look at start welding it up for the customer. See you soon.